It was a regular school day in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of day where everything seemed normal until it wasn't. A group of older kids stood in the shadow of the school's brick wall, their voices low and menacing. At the center of it all was a younger boy, clutching his backpack tightly, trying to stay calm. They surrounded him like a pack of wolves, their taunts echoing across the courtyard. But this boy wasn't just any kid. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that his father was someone they'd never want to mess with: the town's police chief. A man known for his unyielding sense of justice and his ability to spot trouble from a mile away. As the bullies pushed him around, thinking they were untouchable, something was happening behind the scenes that none of them expected. A series of choices and events were already in motion, about to turn the tables in a way they could never see coming. Stay tuned to find out how this unlikely hero's story unfolds and what happens when justice is closer than anyone thinks. The air grew tense as the group of bullies closed in on the boy, their laughter sharp and cruel. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" one sneered, shoving him backward. His heart raced, but he refused to let them see him break. He had learned from his dad to stay calm under pressure, but it was getting harder with every taunt and shove. Unbeknownst to the bullies, someone was watching. Across the street, a local shop owner paused as he loaded crates into his van. He had seen this group before, always causing trouble after school. Something about today felt different, though. The youngest kid, clearly outnumbered, wasn't just scared, he was cornered. The shopkeeper glanced toward the police station just a few blocks away, debating whether to make the call. Meanwhile, inside the circle, the boy's mind raced. He wasn't sure how far these kids were willing to go. One of them grabbed his backpack and dumped it out onto the ground, scattering his books and lunch. "Oops," another jeered, kicking a notebook across the pavement. The boy clenched his fists, his father's words echoing in his mind: "Never let anger make your decisions for you. Think first. Act smart." He wanted to fight back, but he knew it wouldn't end well. These kids were bigger, stronger, and meaner. He needed another plan. What the bullies didn't realize was that his dad had a sixth sense when it came to trouble. That afternoon, the police chief had been on a routine patrol when a gut feeling made him take a detour past the school. He couldn't explain it, but years on the force had taught him to trust his instincts. As he neared the school, his radio crackled with a call about a disturbance near the playground. Back at the scene, the group's ringleader had grown bolder, stepping closer to the boy. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he spat, shoving him again. The boy staggered but stood his ground. He met the bully's glare with steady eyes, refusing to show fear. It only seemed to make the group angrier. One of the bystanders, a classmate who had always stayed silent, shifted uneasily. She didn't like what was happening, but speaking up felt impossible. The group had turned on others before, and she knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of their cruelty. Still, watching the boy stand there, refusing to back down, made her feel something she hadn't in a long time: courage. As the tension grew, the shopkeeper finally made his decision. He pulled out his phone and called the station. "I'm at the corner of Main and Elm, right by the school," he said hurriedly. "There's a group of kids picking on a younger boy. It doesn't look good." The call went through just as the police chief rounded the corner. He spotted the commotion immediately and felt a surge of anger as he recognized his son at the center of it. But he forced himself to stay calm. Bursting in without a plan could escalate things. Instead, he parked a little further away, stepped out of the car, and began walking toward the group, his presence authoritative but measured. The bullies were too absorbed in their intimidation to notice him at first. The chief's son saw him, though, and a flicker of relief crossed his face. The bullies mistook it for fear, laughing louder. "What's the matter? Gonna cry?" one of them mocked, completely oblivious to the looming figure behind them. The girl who had been watching couldn't hold back any longer. "Stop it!" she yelled, her voice breaking through the din. The bullies turned, momentarily distracted. "This isn't right. Leave him alone." Before they could respond, the chief spoke, his voice calm but firm. "What's going on here?" The group froze, the authority in his tone slicing through their bravado. One by one, they turned to see the police chief standing there, his badge glinting in the sunlight. The ringleader tried to play it cool. "We were just messing around," he said, forcing a grin. The chief's eyes narrowed. "Messing around, huh?" He stepped closer, looking each of them in the eye. "It didn't look like messing around from where I'm standing." The bullies shifted uncomfortably, their confidence crumbling. The chief crouched down, picking up the boy's scattered belongings and handing them back to him. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. The boy nodded, his hands trembling as he took his books. Turning back to the group, the chief's tone hardened again. "Do your parents know you're out here acting like this? Because I'm more than happy to give them a call." Panic flickered across their faces. The ringleader stammered, "We didn't mean anything by it. We were just joking." "Funny," the chief replied coldly. "I don't see anyone laughing." Before he could continue, the shopkeeper approached cautiously. "I called the station," he said. "Figured you'd want to know what was going on." The chief nodded in appreciation. "Thanks for looking out." As the situation unfolded, the bystander girl stepped forward. "They've been doing this for weeks," she blurted out, her voice shaking. "Not just to him. To other kids, too." The bullies glared at her, but the chief cut them off. "That true?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for lies. The tension hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. The chief knew this was just the beginning. These kids needed more than a stern warning, they needed to understand the consequences of their actions. And as he looked at his son, standing tall despite everything, he realized this was about more than justice. It was about setting things right for everyone involved. But what would happen next? Would the bullies face the consequences? And how would the chief's son cope with the aftermath of this confrontation? The answers were still to come, and the story was far from over. The chief stood his ground, waiting for the bullies to respond. They shuffled awkwardly, avoiding his piercing gaze. The ringleader's smirk had long since disappeared, replaced by a nervous twitch. Finally, one of the boys mumbled, "We didn't mean for it to go this far." The chief's expression didn't soften. "Intent doesn't erase the harm you've caused," he said firmly. "Do you have any idea how much damage this kind of behavior does not just to him but to everyone who has to deal with your actions?" He gestured toward his son and then to the girl who had spoken up. "It takes courage to stand up against people like you. You should be ashamed of yourselves for making others feel small." The girl, emboldened by the chief's words, added, "They've been scaring kids for months. It's not just jokes, they make people feel unsafe." Hearing her speak, the chief's son found his voice. "You think being tough means tearing others down, but it doesn't. My dad always says real strength is about protecting people, not hurting them." His voice wavered, but the resolve in his eyes was unmistakable. The chief placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "He's right," he said. "And now it's time for you all to take responsibility for your actions." The bullies exchanged uneasy glances. One of the quieter ones, clearly regretting his involvement, said, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to do any of this. I just went along with it because I didn't want to get picked on too." The chief's stern gaze softened slightly. "Following the crowd doesn't excuse your behavior, but recognizing your mistakes is a step in the right direction. The question is, what are you going to do to make it right?" Silence fell over the group. The ringleader looked at the chief's badge, then at his son. His bravado was gone, replaced by a flicker of guilt. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "We'll stop. I swear." "Stopping isn't enough," the chief replied. "You need to own up to what you've done and work to repair the harm. That starts with apologizing to him, to the others you've bullied, and to your own families when they hear about this." The mention of their parents made the boys squirm, but they nodded reluctantly. "We're sorry," the ringleader mumbled, looking at the chief's son. The others echoed his words, though some seemed more sincere than others. The chief didn't let them off the hook so easily. "You'll be hearing from me again," he said. "We're going to have a conversation with the school and your families to ensure this behavior stops for good. Actions have consequences, and it's time you learned that." As the bullies dispersed, heads hanging low, the chief turned to his son. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Standing up for yourself in a situation like that isn't easy." His son managed a small smile. "I just did what you always taught me. Stay calm, think things through, and don't let fear control you." The girl who had spoken up earlier hesitated before stepping forward. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner," she said. "I was scared, but it wasn't right to just watch it happen." The chief shook his head. "Don't apologize for finding your courage. What you did today took guts. Speaking out against bullies isn't easy, especially when you've been on the receiving end yourself." She smiled faintly, and the chief's son nodded. "Thanks for standing up for me," he said. "It made a difference." Over the next few days, the chief followed through on his promise. He met with the school principal, the bullies' parents, and even brought in a counselor to talk to the students about the effects of bullying. The principal implemented a new anti-bullying initiative, involving the students in workshops and activities to promote kindness and empathy. The bullies were assigned community service and required to attend sessions with the counselor. The ringleader, initially resistant, slowly began to open up about his own struggles. It turned out his behavior was rooted in anger and insecurity, things he had never learned how to express. The chief's son, meanwhile, found his confidence growing. Word of what had happened spread, and he was no longer seen as an easy target. More importantly, he learned that he wasn't alone. Other kids started sharing their own stories of being bullied, and together they began to support one another. The girl who had spoken up became a leader in the school's new peer support program. Her bravery inspired others to find their voices, creating a ripple effect that transformed the school's culture. As the days turned into weeks, the town saw the lasting impact of one moment of courage. The chief's son, his head held high, walked into school each day knowing he had the strength to face whatever came his way. The bullies, now humbled, worked to rebuild trust and earn back the respect of their peers. And the chief, watching from the sidelines, couldn't have been prouder. He had always believed in the power of justice, but this time, it was personal. His son had taught him something, too, that real change starts when people stand together, even in the face of fear. The story ended not with a single victory but with a community coming together to ensure everyone felt safe and valued. And in that, there was a lesson for everyone: strength isn't about overpowering others, it's about lifting them up.